Welcome back. Today we're diving into part 2 of our GLP-1 podcast series. If you are tuning in for the first time, we recommend you go back and listen to episode 25 where we... I'm going to just start that right over. Welcome back. Today we're diving into part 2 of our GLP-1 podcast series. If you're tuning in for the first time, we'd recommend listening to episode 25 first, where we cover what GLP-1 is and discuss some pros and cons of popular GLP-1 agonist medications like Ozempic and Wegovy. Today, we're going to dive in and talk about natural ways to boost GLP-1, as well as cover some trendy topics we've seen on social media, like using Berberine as nature's Ozempic.
I've been excited to jump into this side of the conversation. So to kick off, let's talk about some natural ways to boost GLP-1. So GLP-1 secretion can be activated by both key nutrients and lifestyle practices. So we're going to dive into the most significant ones that most of us have access to right now. So let's start with key nutrients. So GLP-1 secretion is activated by nutrients entering the intestines. And research shows that key nutrients can actually enhance the secretion and beneficial effects of GLP-1. And the most significant nutrients to increase GLP-1 secretion and action are, the first is protein. So meals rich in dietary proteins and their individual amino acids show a significant stimulatory effect on GLP-1 secretions, which is a major player in protein's more satiating and blood sugar balancing effects when optimally included in meals. It's also been shown that eating the protein portion of the meal first enhances GLP-1 secretion in both individuals with normal blood sugar and individuals with type 2 diabetes. So suggesting that eating protein first and your starchier carbohydrates maybe second or later in the meal can play a role in enhancing GLP-1 to better regulate blood sugar.
Is there anything that protein doesn't do, can't do?
I mean, I was like, oh, this is so satisfying.
I know. And add it to the list of reasons why protein is queen.
I really, like, through this entire list, I was like, oh, this is just validation of everything that we talk about. But I swear we didn't cherry pick anything. No. So the next nutrient are fibers and fermentable carbohydrates. So fermentable dietary fiber and their metabolites, so those are the short chain fatty acids, which are compounds that are produced from healthy bacteria in the gut when they eat the fibers from our diet. Those promote GLP-1 secretion from the intestinal cells. And increasing fermentable fiber in the diet for 4 to 6 weeks showed a decrease in food intake, weight gain, as well as blood triglyceride concentrations and triglyceride accumulation in the liver through increased GLP-1 secretions. So 4 to 6 weeks, that's a pretty tight little timeline there just by increasing these kind of fermentable carbohydrates. And we talk about fiber in a previous episode. So definitely tune in there if you haven't already. All right, next up, we got the MUFAs and the PUFAs, or really talking about Mediterranean diets. So diets that are rich in MUFAs, which I love to call them that, monounsaturated fatty acids, specifically from olive oil, and PUFAs, which are polyunsaturated fatty acids, more specifically alpha-linoleic acid from flax oil and omega-3 from fish oil, increase GLP-1 secretion in the intestines, which show to support insulin sensitivity, beta cell proliferation, as well as improved glucose tolerance. There's even a study that shows a Mediterranean-rich diet rich in olive oil eaten for 28 days resulted in significantly higher postprandial GLP-1 blood concentrations. Again, we're kind of showing like a month to a month and a half of some of these kind of more nutrient density fermentable carbohydrates, fibers, even more of these like healthy fats can make a significant influence on this GLP-1 pathway. So we're not talking about needing months and months and months to get some of these pretty significant shifts.
Which is super cool. given that we are often over here preaching healing takes time, dietary changes, lifestyle changes take time. And I think it's really amazing when we do have data to support using food to increase, GLP-1 secretion and concentrations in a short period of time. And you can only imagine, what happens long term if you're consistently focusing on these foods that Abby's mentioning.
Absolutely. And this is only, we're only looking through the lens of like one marker in the body right now. Like GLP-1 is just one facet of what's happening in our like incredibly intricate kind of orchestra of all of the things that happen to like digest, absorb, and kind of communicate with the foods and nutrients that we eat. So, when we see one positive shift based on these like nutrient dense inclusions, like we can only imagine there's a tremendous amount more that's happening in response also. All right, so foods that produce or promote rather bile production. Again, all of our favorite topics here. Bile acids are well-recognized stimulants of the GLP-1 secretion. So bile is most notably triggered when bitter foods are consumed in the diet. So bitter foods include things like apple cider vinegar, bitter greens, citrus and citrus rinds, fermentable foods, and most notable from the research of GLP-1 is coffee, which is rich in bitter cholinergic acid, chologenic acid. I knew I was going to say that one wrong. That is shown to be a potent stimulator of GLP-1. So then we got a plug for coffee in here too. We've also got yerba mate tea. So yerba mate tea is a caffeinated black tea, which induce significant increases in GLP-1 levels and leptin levels compared to kind of controls, which I thought was interesting, just such a specific kind of type of tea. And then lastly, from the nutrient side, we have meal composition and timing. So this is really the case for breakfast. In patients with type 2 diabetes, consuming a high energy breakfast has shown to increase GLP-1 levels and decrease elevated blood sugar post-meal compared to high energy dinners and low energy breakfasts. So essentially what that's saying is that eating a substantial breakfast supports increases in GLP-1 levels. And if you make it a high protein breakfast, we've got ourselves a double winner there.
Woo woo.
And to plug another topic near and dear to our hearts, the case for chewing. In healthy individuals, chewing 30 times per bite increased endogenous GLP-1 levels compared with usual eating. And even more notable that quickly eating was significantly associated with greater risk of metabolic syndrome as compared with slow eating. Chewing and breakfast, here we go.
Two of our favorite things to talk about. And as a fun little side note here, and I think there's a variety of reasons why this happens, but to speak to what Abby's talking about, with chewing and GLP-1 levels, based on my experience utilizing CGMs or continuous glucose monitors with clients and with myself personally, I just finished doing a 6-week experiment, and eating quickly and not chewing well is definitely something that I see have a big impact on my postprandial or post-meal blood sugar levels. And just, in thinking about GLP-1 and kind of all of the other, gut hormones and digestive secretions and things that are stimulated by chewing and allowing our body enough time to produce these things, it makes sense. But just wanted to throw that in as a side note because I was appalled at my blood sugar response after a day where I was like rushing through, lunch and, thought I had this beautifully well-rounded meal. And, to my surprise, not really my surprise, given I was eating quickly, my blood sugar was all over the place. So
it was really interesting to hear Jillian and I kind of talked about some of her takeaways that, so she noticed a lot. I mean, granted, you are putting together very like balanced meals to what we really educate around. But that so much of what did throw your blood sugar was like the how you eat, the like quickness or the length of time between your meals, or like so much of the like how we're going about our day which sometimes I know can be like almost discredited because you're like, oh, I'll just, so it's like, it seems very simple.
Totally. And it's like, I'm eating all the healthy, nutritious, well-rounded meals, and those things do get neglected. And I think sometimes we forget how, profound chewing, not eating in a stressed out state, eating at consistent increments and, aligning eating with our circadian rhythm. These things matter, and they can really, sort of derail efforts to balance blood sugar and support metabolic health if we're not, focusing on the whole picture.
Absolutely. So important. So actually kind of in alignment with that conversation. So in addition to nutrients and foods, these key lifestyle practices have shown to play a significant role in promoting GLP-1 secretion for more optimal metabolic health. We've got exercise and muscle mass. So acute exercise has shown an increased secretion and responsiveness to GLP-1 through an increase in IL-6 levels during exercise. So kind of the acute inflammation that exercise produces in the body, which then builds muscle as a result. But additionally, exercise stimulates the production of those short chain fatty acids. So those are kind of the byproducts from some of our beneficial bacteria in the gut that also promote greater secretion of GLP-1, which is so fascinating that we can see an influence in the gut microbiome through exercise. Like you almost, if you just made an assumption about that, like they feel like two totally separate things, but they're actually incredibly interconnected. And then we've got quality and quantity of sleep. So lack of quality or quantity of sleep shows a delayed response to GLP-1 release as compared to individuals who experience normal sleep patterns. So a lack of sleep actually reduces our GLP-1 activity and responsiveness. So this is really where, focusing on kind of our quality of sleep, our quantity of sleep, our habits and behaviors around sleep, our circadian rhythm, like all of the things that we really talked a tremendous amount about actually in season 1 are so much of the foundations to optimal metabolic health and weight loss, be it if those are, in kind of our goals, because they are having a direct response on our body's utilization of this GLP-1 pathway and really the way that it's receiving the nutrients and the meals that we put in. So, nothing is not connected in the body, right?
It's all interconnected at the end of the day. And now that you have a sense of some action steps, lifestyle, nutrition strategies that you can take action with, really in an immediate sense to, support GLP-1 and to, kind of support overall blood sugar, metabolic health, let's talk a little bit about supplements, and specifically supplements that naturally increase GLP-1. And I want to kick this off by talking about berberine. Berberine has gained a lot of attention recently and is now being referred to as nature's Ozempic. I am chuckling to myself because when we were planning out episodes for season 3 of the podcast, we initially didn't have, these GLP-1 episodes in here. And Abby, I remember you texting me one day and mentioning that, there are these TikTokers that are taking fistfuls of berberine and, as nature's Ozempic. And we were like, all right, we're revamping the schedule. We are diving in. We are talking about, GLP-1 agonist, berberine. Let's do it.
Very necessary. Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about berberine, and then we'll talk a bit more about some other kind of natural supplements that may increase or enhance GLP-1. So what is berberine? What the heck does it do? Berberine is a bioactive compound found in various plants, and it has strong biological and pharmacological activities. It has been used in traditional medicine as a plant extract for years and years, but it's, again, received a lot of interest very recently as nature's Ozempic. But really in recent years as a whole, berberine is being studied as a treatment option for various diseases and symptoms. as a supplement, berberine does have many potential benefits when it's used in the right context. And it's probably most well known for its impact on blood sugar and insulin resistance and for its cardioprotective benefits. Berberine works by increasing insulin receptor expression, activating an enzyme called AMPK, and by stimulating the uptake of glucose into your cells. So essentially, berberine can help make your cells more sensitive to the blood sugar regulating hormone insulin, as well as support your body with utilizing glucose or sugar more efficiently. Some research suggests that berberine may increase GLP-1 by activating bitter receptor pathways in the body, which Abby just spoke a little bit about in terms of utilizing bitter foods. But overall, there's a few different ways that berberine can improve blood sugar. When we're lowering blood sugar or balancing blood sugar rather and improving insulin resistance, both of these things can improve metabolic health and ultimately lead to shifts with weight over time if that's something you're working towards. Berberine, when used to kind of produce these benefits, does need to be dosed properly. It needs to be a high quality supplement and it needs to be taken at the appropriate times or in appropriate increments, and it generally does need to be used for at least 3 months for significant benefits to occur. So it's not, kind of a magic bullet supplement. Berberine also has many potential benefits for gut health when used in the right context. It acts as an antimicrobial and antifungal, and because the bioavailability of oral berberine is low, it can easily reach the intestines and interact with the gut microbiota, all the microbes living in the gut. Studies have found that berberine decreases the diversity of certain bad bacteria, like LPS-producing bacteria or lipopolysaccharide-producing bacteria, which are more inflammatory. And berberine can also, at the same time, support other beneficial species. Berberine actually enriches populations of short-chain fatty acid producing bacteria like butyrate. Abby just talked a bit about these short-chain fatty acids, which are metabolites produced by bacteria in the gut when they ferment specific fibers that we eat. We refer to these short-chain fatty acids often as postbiotics. And these short-chain fatty acids are super crucial for supporting the gut itself, specifically the integrity of the gut lining, and they play a really important role in metabolic health, weight, and blood sugar balance. So this speaks to what we've been discussing in regards to weight since season 1 of this podcast. Weight is not just about calories in versus calories out. Yes, energy balance does matter, but even the health of the gut microbiome and the balance of species in the gut, the integrity of the gut lining, these things play a big role in our systemic health and specifically with metabolic health and weight. Small studies have also found that berberine has beneficial effects on the immune system and may also be an effective treatment option for GI conditions like SIBO or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. There's also a lot of data on berberine supplementation specific to PCOS. Recent comparative studies done on berberine and metformin in PCOS have found that berberine is as effective as the medication metformin for improving insulin resistance. But berberine actually has a greater potential to reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease in PCOS because of the benefits it has on improving lipids and hormone parameters. Berberine is a natural supplement, and there's lots of benefits that we're talking about here and certain cases where berberine can be really impactful. But even supplements do have side effects. Side effects with berberine or reported side effects with berberine are minimal in comparison to what we talked about with GLP-1 agonist medications in the first episode in this series. But berberine can produce some side effects, usually specific to digestive health or digestive symptoms like gas, diarrhea, and stomach upset. Those are some of the most commonly reported symptoms. So in terms of how Abby and I utilize berberine or don't utilize berberine, because berberine is an herbal antimicrobial, a potent herbal antimicrobial, we really want to be mindful of using it in the right context and not using it in the wrong context, which when we're thinking about the antimicrobial kind of effects of berberine, if we are overusing berberine, we're dosing it too high, we're using it in the wrong context, it could potentially lead to overweighting the gut and depleting healthy gut bacteria, which could create further problems. Abby and I both utilize comprehensive stool testing with all of our one-on-one clients in practice. And there are lots of cases where berberine might be appropriate, specifically with SIBO, like I mentioned, or clients that are presenting with a lot of dysbiotic bacterial overgrowth. But there are lots of cases where we find clients are not struggling with any overgrowth dynamic, and they're actually dealing with a big insufficiency dynamic, meaning they are wildly depleted. They don't have, a lot of dysbiotic overgrowth, and they lack, sufficient healthy commensal bacteria. So in this case, we can, assume why something like berberine might not be super beneficial or supportive in that context. Sorry. Another thing to think about is, okay, maybe a client is a potential candidate for berberine, and they would be a great fit based on what's going on with their gut, their metabolic health, but we need to do a lot of prep work first in order to increase their tolerance and the efficacy of using berberine. So maybe we need to open up and support drainage pathways. We need to support the gut immune system if that's shot. Or maybe we need to support Or maybe we need to support the adrenals and balance cortisol before integrating, oh my gosh, I can't talk today. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're good.
Or maybe we need to support the adrenals and balance cortisol before bringing in berberine, so we don't put too much stress on the body with, a kill protocol or using something like berberine. So ultimately, what we're trying to say here is that context is king. And we always just want to be very thoughtful about when we're using supplements, how we're using supplements, and really treating the individual and their unique needs, and not just blindly bringing in something like berberine that is potent.
I think you did a really good job on kind of showing that, yes, this isn't coming out of nowhere in terms of berberine does have a lot of benefits to it, but we can still be using, it's like you're trying to hammer a nail and you've got a saw in your hand. And it's okay, that's not going to do anything for the nail. So, if somebody is kind of saying all right, well, I want to lose weight and I'm going to use berberine to do it, but they're actually not struggling with, metabolic imbalances aren't there, the root cause of their weight loss, because weight loss is, complex, and they, have low populations of beneficial bacteria, or they have a low immune system in the gut, or they're, not going to the bathroom and their drainage pathways are literally physically congested. That person is not going to have a very successful time on berberine, because it's using the saw to try to hammer in the nail. They're missing the root cause as to why they uniquely are struggling with weight in that situation, or potentially even just the order of operations that need to be done. And this is really where, when we utilize some heavy hitting supplements like this, we really should be working with someone who understands how to utilize these tools based on that unique person that they're working with.
100%. We never want to blindly supplement. And just, to speak to how Abby and I, practice in our own clinical practices, comprehensive lab data, a clinical assessment, and evaluating the unique needs of that individual. So we really want to make sure that berberine, or whatever supplement it is, makes sense, and that it's really going to create forward motion with an individual's health. And it's also important to remember too that supplements are just one piece of the treatment plan, a small piece of the puzzle. And as we always say, supplements are kind of like the cherry on top. They can be very impactful and an integral part of a client's protocol, but they are just one part. And ultimately, the foundations are going to be essential for, opening the body up to being responsive to some of these therapeutic supplements.
Absolutely. And kind of thinking of like going through the list of everything that we opened the episode with of like, are those foundations? Because many of those that we talked about, like the protein and the meal timing and robust breakfast intake and even bitter foods, like this is so much of the things that we've really touched on in our foundational episodes that are naturally supporting of this kind of GLP-1 pathway. And those are, really that yellow brick road that's going to lead us to gradual, balancing in weight based on, our unique body or healing of the gut or, supporting of your hormones, like whatever that end goal is, like the foundations are where we start because they are going to take us at least the first significant steps to that destination.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, if you listen to the first part of this GLP-1 podcast series, we made the same recommendation or had kind of the same commentary around using GLP-1 agonist medications in terms of that doesn't mean we can bypass, the protein and the fiber and the meal timing and, circadian rhythm. So let's talk about other supplements that might possibly enhance GLP-1. And I want to preface this too by saying that because medications like Ozempic are synthetic, they are modified in a way that is going to make them more resistant to degradation in the body by, enzymes specifically. And these medications like the Ozempic and the Wegovy are going to have more of a sustained effect on GLP-1 receptors than our own GLP-1. That's, kind of the nature of how, supplements and some of these strategies we're describing versus a synthetic medication is going to work. This is why people often see a much stronger and much faster impact with these synthetic medications. With that being said, we definitely can, utilize all of these different tools we're talking about and the supplements I'm going to touch on in a minute to enhance our own GLP-1 and to really maximize GLP-1 secretion for reversing insulin resistance, improving, metabolic health and weight loss. But these things definitely do take more time, and we aren't seeing those, rapid, drastic results that people are experiencing with something like Ozempic, which in our opinion is a good thing. Low and slow wins the race. Sustainability, I'll die on the sustainability hill. But first up for other supplements outside of berberine, bitter tinctures. So we covered, the benefits of bitters, like Abby mentioned in our functional foods episode, and Abby touched on the benefits of bitter foods here in this episode. But bitter tinctures as a supplement are something that both Abby and I absolutely love and often use with our clients for various reasons. Bitter tinctures are made by infusing bitter herbs into alcohol to make basically a potent bitter solution. So they usually come in a little, glass bottle, and they're potent and they're also very convenient since you can, travel with them and, they're just easy to carry around. One specific benefit of using bitter tinctures before meals is that they do activate those bitter receptors and they increase or enhance that GLP-1 secretion. Some favorites that research suggests are effective in terms of specific bitter herbs for stimulating GLP-1 include, I'm going to butcher all of these names, by the way, gentian, I think is how you say it, fenugreek, ginger, ginseng, and turmeric. Those are some of the top ones in research. For products that Abby and I like, the big ones that come to mind for me are I really like Quicksilver Scientific No. 9 bitters. I also really like the Organic Olivia Gluco bitters. Do you have any favorites, Ab?
There's it's sold, I literally just had it in my brain and then it flew out. It's sold at Whole Foods.
Urban Moonshine?
Urban Moonshine, thank you.
Yes.
I was like, wait,
they're like the OG.
Yes,
they're great.
Totally.
Yeah.
I feel like those ones are a little bit more like consumer forward. So you can kind of pick them up, like they're sold in the wellness section at Whole Foods and places like that. And I like to think too, in this area where, we're utilizing bitters actually are also really beneficial to reducing symptoms like bloating and help with gut motility, which is the absolute opposite of what the GLP-1 antagonists are doing, because that's the mechanism that they work through. So it's like we're actually working with the body in the way that it wants to be worked with when we're utilizing these more like natural supports, and we're, very much synthetically changing the way the body is working when we're using the like kind of synthetic medication. So just something to, a little bit maybe more benefit, especially if you're listening to this and you're like, well, I already struggle with bloating. So, putting me on like something like a GLP-1 agonist is only gonna, like, for myself, I'm like, no, if anything, my body goes towards constipation. Like, I ain't going near those with a 10-foot pole for multitudes of reasons. But like, I like my gut motility now that I got it going.
Yes, exactly. And I think, that's a big reason why we love utilizing bitter tinctures with clients, is because we're working with the body at the end of the day, which is always ideal, and kind of enhancing how it operates, and optimizing that. Other supplements that can be helpful, other supplements that might be helpful, functional fiber supplements. So functional fibers can also be an effective way alongside adequate dietary fiber intake for enhancing GLP-1. Functional fibers are non-digestible carbohydrates that are essentially isolated and turned into a concentrated supplement, usually in a powder form. There's capsules too, but typically we're utilizing these in powder form. Using functional fiber supplements are a way that we can support healthy gut bacteria with higher amounts of key fibers that are going to encourage the production of those short chain fatty acids that we mentioned, and increasing the short chain fatty acids will directly stimulate the secretion of GLP-1. Supplements that increase a specific species of bacteria in the gut can also be helpful. This species of bacteria is called Akkermansia. Akkermansia is important for a variety of reasons, but supporting Akkermansia specifically, and I will say too, Abby and I often see a lot of depletion with this specific species of bacteria on gut tests. So by supporting Akkermansia, we can actually increase GLP-1 secretion as well. And supplements that could help do this would be prebiotic fiber supplements, so some of those functional fiber supplements, and also red polyphenols, which can certainly be brought into the diet via food, and we certainly encourage that. If we are really depleted or kind of non-detectable with Akkermansia, we may recommend introducing, an oral supplement or a powdered supplement that brings in those red polyphenols. I think we've mentioned on this podcast before that we really like Organifi's Reds powder. It tastes amazing. It's, gives you all the fruit punch vibes, and it contains a lot of those red polyphenols that can help to increase Akkermansia and therefore increase GLP-1 secretion.
Yeah, I think like low or non-detectable levels of Akkermansia is like hands down the most common thing that we see on stool testing. And that's kind of in that family of beneficial bacteria that we want to see like robust and balanced. And that guy is often like very depleted in the majority of, I would say the majority of clients that I certainly test. I don't know, Jilly, if you see the same.
I would completely agree. And even, if I'm working with someone that has a lot of depletion with various healthy commensal bacteria, and we work on a lot of different interventions, Akkermansia is usually the slowest to rebound in my experience too, and often does need more kind of targeted support through a combination of functional fibers and these red polyphenols. And ultimately, Akkermansia is one of the biggest producers of butyrate, one of those short chain fatty acids at the end of the day. So again, it's all interconnected.
He's a sensitive little bugger.
Akkermansia is sensitive little guy.
He's a personality in my head.
Yeah. A few other supplements that have been found to enhance GLP-1 secretion include curcumin, found in turmeric, resveratrol, cinnamon, and alpha-lipoic acid. Just kind of personally, professionally, alpha-lipoic acid is another supplement that I do love for supporting blood sugar balance in the right context. I will often use combination products that provide berberine, alpha-lipoic acid, and maybe some other, kind of blood sugar supportive or insulin supportive, nutrients. And ultimately, there are many different tools that we can utilize to enhance GLP-1 and to maximize its benefit for improving our overall health and certainly to support weight loss efforts. We are such a broken record here, but it really is important to remember no supplement in isolation is going to be the magic bullet. So again, these things really need to be used alongside the nutrition and lifestyle foundations to really kind of move the needle at the end of the day. But we hope that with highlighting all of these different lifestyle, food strategies, supplement strategies, that there might be a couple things that stand out to you in terms of, really an opportunity to work with your own body, enhance GLP-1, and to really reap some of these benefits. And ultimately, we really just want you to know that these medications, the GLP-1 agonists, these aren't the be-all, end-all. These aren't the only things that, are going to increase GLP-1. So we talked about some of the issues that we are seeing with medications like Ozempic in the last podcast, but I think it's important to call out again that really our biggest issue with these medications gaining a lot of popularity is that people are being given these medications and they are given nothing else. First and foremost, they're not given adequate information about, side effects, and, they don't have the ability to make true informed decisions, but they're also not being supported with the crucial nutrition and lifestyle foundations alongside, being recommended that medication, which we just really feel strongly does a disservice to people and their health long term. So, sorry, I just lost myself here. So ultimately, we are using these GLP-1 agonist medications to help people, use weight in isolation. But because we're doing that in isolation, we're essentially trading in obesity for starvation with how these things are being used. And it really, to what we talked about in the first episode, losing all of your lean muscle, dysregulating the HPA axis and kind of gut function, these do have implications, and it's not to scare you. It's not to say that there's no place for these medications, but we really need to, kind of weigh all the pros and cons here. I heard a scientist recently that referred to the use of these medications as a distraction from the core issues we're facing. And I thought that was a really profound way to speak to how we're seeing these medications being used.
I think that term distraction really hits the nail on the head, to, run with our same metaphor there. Because, in the last handful of years, we've really seen these GLP-1 agonists become synonymous with weight loss, and everything from, TikTok to Hollywood to, people documenting their Ozempic journeys, which, is very, hits on all the triggers, I think, for, everyone who's wanted and desired this goal of weight loss. But what we're really seeing even more that kind of hits Jillian and I certain in the heart center is we've fallen right back into step with the glorification of quick weight loss at the expense of health. So weight loss does not equal health, and we have to continue to remind ourselves and our society as a whole that the size of your body does not dictate the state of its inner well-being. And this Ozempic craze has only further entrenched the unrealistic beauty standards, particularly for women, that are really the greatest threat against women living at peace in their own bodies. And, we see in our practices day in and day out that the number one driver of hormone and gut symptoms is chronic undereating. And unfortunately, this drug that's being touted as this miracle drug is only further fueling that fire. And really, it couldn't be further from, what we're really seeking for so many women is to live, at peace in their body, to feed and nourish their body, and to come into kind of step into the rhythms with which our body is constantly seeking and moving with. Our greatest goal of this podcast is to really help our community deeply believe that the more they show up for, nourish, and value their bodies will do the same for them. not overnight, but over time, you will come out on the other side stronger, less symptomatic, and filled with vibrancy. And that is a soapbox that we will stand on, the hill that we will die on.
Heck yes. That was so beautifully said, Abby. And, to your point, really speaks to the premise of this entire podcast and the mission that Abby and I have, for this podcast. And it's just, it's important to acknowledge how challenging it is out there, especially for women, navigating their health, navigating, body image, diet culture, social media. We're up against a lot, and it does take conscious effort and awareness to not kind of fall victim to this, lose weight above all else kind of mentality and messaging and strategies. So, know that we're all in this together. And I think the more that we can remind ourselves that our bodies have our back, and the more that we can work with our body, support, nourish, value our body, like Abby said, the more we are going to see leaps and bounds with our health across the board.